Let's start. Let's start with our webinar about service design. I am very happy, we are very happy to welcome you to our webinar about service design. Before we start, we would like to introduce ourselves to you, to the audience. I am Danny. I've been working for HYVE for more than 9 years now, and my academic background is business economics. With the focus on marketing and open innovation. And here in HYVE, I'm responsible for the sales department, and I'm very happy to moderate this webinar today and to welcome our guest speaker, our service design expert, Anna Marchuk here. Anna.
Everyone also from my side, and welcome to our webinar. So just a few words about myself. So I started at HYVE 4 years ago, and I started here as innovation researcher, and I have gained a lot of experience in customer-centric innovation, and it's part of understanding the people. And then my role actually evolved into service design, and because actually I always have been fascinated about like this holistic experiences, and I always felt the importance of that, and the discipline of service design so much fits to this, and so much fits to this very strong connection to the users and understanding their needs. And so my role evolved actually into doing more international projects, bigger projects, and more projects also that are service design oriented. So, and at the moment at HYVE, I am senior researcher, so it's still part of my role, and also a lead service designer, and I'm let's say developing this method with our HYVE team.
Thank you very much, Anna, and you can really feel that you are a really expert in the topic, and we are very happy that you can give us some of your experience today to the audience within that webinar. Maybe some words about the structure. So the webinar will be around 45 minutes. And if you have any questions, you can use the chat functionality of the tool and send us your questions. We will have some minutes left after Anna's presentation, and we will try to answer your questions then. And to start the webinar, I will make a very short introduction about HYVE, what is HYVE and what is the company about, and that you can focus on the slides. I will now switch to the slide mode. So now you can see our slides. And as I said, a very rough introduction about HYVE. So what is HYVE? What is the House of Innovation? Actually, since 2000, we help our clients create successful innovations end-to-end. What does this mean, end-to-end? That means from the very early research and the exploration phase to the idea generation and until the development of prototypes. That's our mission. And we do this across industries. So, for example, from helping Bayersdorf creating a whole new category of deodorants in the fast-moving consumer goods market, which has been sold over 3.5 billion times worldwide. Or another example, a startup like Lithium, we helped them revolutionize the e-mobility market and the air transport market. And no matter what kind of innovation the output of our project is, either is it a product innovation or a service innovation, if it's something physical or something digital, we really have one focus in mind, and this focus is the consumer, so the customer centricity, because we really like to focus on his requirements and on his needs, because according to our experience, the customer does not want just another feature or another function. He wants a full, smooth experience. That's what the client wants. And I think that's a very good link to service design, because especially in this era now of digitization, where a lot of companies transform from product companies to service companies, the services and the whole customer experience have become more and more. And therefore, I am very happy to give you this to introduce us to service design.
Thanks, Danny. Actually, you're right that at the moment in the experience economy, like more and more companies, they can definitely benefit from service design approach. That's why we also decided to do this webinar, and I'm happy to share the introduction to the discipline, to the method, and also share some learnings from our experience in the project. So just to start with the core question, so what is actually service design? And to be honest, even in the service design community, there are so many discussions about defining the discipline. So I will just start with actually my favorite thought about it. So, well, service design actually creates what we experience every day, and it really defines how good our experiences are. So just think about it. For example, if you think about an airport, so airport, it's a large hub that is providing all the different types of services. But the most interesting fact is that actually your experience starts the way far away from the airport building. Just think about your last online check-in that you probably did at home or in the office. So apart from that physical building, there is so much going on beyond it. Or think about the drive now. Well, you know that car historically has been associated with such a special and private and personal way of transportation. And then the service that was introduced, actually, it completely changed the way of how the same physical object as a car is being used. So it's an app and a service behind it that actually changed this experience. Or for example, Nike, right? So they're typically doing sports apparel, and it's something that was not maybe associated much with the services. However, in addition to their running product line, they introduced an app and a service, Nike Plus Runner Club. And what it does, it tracks runners' performance, it motivates, it does personalized coaching for the runners. And in this way, it actually provides the whole new dimension to the brand of Nike, just by delivering this service and its actually experience to its customers. So defining service design. As a discipline, service design is about designing the ecosystem that deliver meaningful experiences to users across physical and digital touch points. So I like this very holistic definition because I feel that it's really a core of the service design, having big picture and really deliver the best for the users and in the context of the ecosystem. So when we think about service design at HYVE, we think about it as an integrative, human-centric approach, and we also always emphasize that actually it has to balance the needs and the wishes of all the humans who are involved. So it's not only the users, but it's also the organizations, because organizations, they're the ones who deliver the services. And this is very important for delivering seamless experiences and ensuring successful implementation and long-term business growth. On the other hand, service design is very collaborative and agile way that is a special way of working that allows the teams to have the maximum impact during the development process, but also not only during the development process, but just by applying this method, you build up the culture and the mindset. This helps you also with the future innovation. And what service design can do? Well, since it's very much human-centric, it allows to get deep insights about your customer experience. And by understanding the customer experience, you identify innovation opportunities beyond the traditional product offering. It's all about this holistic perspective and understanding the ecosystem around your traditional product or service offering. And of course, what it can do, it creates holistic experiences, and it doesn't look at specific, let's say, ways of interaction. So it looks across physical and digital touch points, because of course services always have some sort of element that makes them more visible or tangible that come into digital or physical than product and the touch points. And finally, service design can definitely help with shifting from product-oriented to service-oriented business models that we also observe a lot in the industry, that now more and more companies, even if they don't make a complete shift, but they might add the service offering to their products to actually create additional value for their customers and also have a stronger position among their competitors. So how does service design actually work? So what it is clear, but I imagine at the moment it sounds very general. It can do anything, everything, and well, it can be probably associated also with different disciplines. On the other hand, yeah, we understood that it has this holistic approach. But how to actually do it. So service design has principles. So these are the classic principles in the industry, and they are from Adam Lawrence and his book Service Design Doing, which I really like. And the main principles are that, as I mentioned before, service design is human-centered, so considering all people involved in service. It is collaborative because it involves stakeholders from various backgrounds and engages them in the process. It is iterative because it's about exploration, adaptation, improvement. So it's a lot about iterative doing. Service design is also sequential. So if you think about service as a movie, right? So previous scene should always make sense for the next scene and have the scenes connected. So service design is very sequential. That's why it is really important when you design the services or when you apply the method, you look beyond your product offering to make sure that actually this experience makes sense to your user. Also, service design is real. So what we mean here is actually that service design should really be based on real human needs, and it should provide prototypes along the process that feel real to people, to be able to test it, to give feedback, to give the feeling of the teams if they're on the right path. And it is also real because at the end, we all know that services, well, they're like associated with various intangible field, but at the end, they do find their place in certain physical or digital reality. So we receive some artifacts that make services a little bit more present in our life. And it is also holistic, something that I mentioned. About the service design mindset, so I always like to say that it's the method and approach is a lot about the mindset, and you will see that it is quite similar, or it strongly builds on the innovation mindset or the sweet spot of innovation. So of course, services have to be built on the customer centricity. So the services that we create have to be useful, usable, desirable. There is important aspect of technology. So the services should be feasible, effective, and efficient. And in this case, I also emphasize that, of course, the technology plays a role when it's facing the end user of the service. On the other hand, in the service design process, we also speak a lot about enabling technologies that live inside the organizations, and maybe they help to the organizations to deliver better services to the user. So technology has many different facets in the service design process. And of course, finally, the business model, because services have to live long life, they have to be viable, they have to be sustainable. So thinking about the business aspect is important, and there is quite a lot of also business model innovation going on in connection to service design. However, there is also one more aspect to this to add when it comes to services, and we call it future readiness, because well, services, they're agile by design, because while doing service design, teams and yeah, people who get involved in this and the stakeholders to develop the services, it's this very iterative, agile process. And by being engaged in service design initiatives, this mindset, it gets adopted. That's why actually service design makes you future ready for addressing the future needs of your users, because the world is not stable, the needs are evolving, technologies are changing. So just by applying service design methodology, it also helps to be more agile and also be future ready by living this approach. Of course, service design is also not only the mindset or this philosophy, because it has very specific service design tools. And very important is that, of course, these tools and methods, they help to see the experiences from the customer perspective. So in service design, you have a lot of tools that actually are associated a lot with the research, or they build on research. For example, if you think about this classic things like customer journeys or user stories or all the other words that you might have heard. So I strongly believe that they make sense when they're research-based, so they really have to represent the customer perspective. And also there are tools to develop innovative solutions for physical and digital touchpoints. So all the prototyping tools or service blueprints, it's something to really develop the concepts and then make them more and more present and finally go towards implementation. On the other hand, of course, in the service design, except from this exploration and implementation phase of the services, there are also tools that keep teams aligned and focused on the common goal. And there are tools that facilitate this agile and iterative process. So in this discipline, it goes along because, as I mentioned before, at some points of the process, we need to involve different stakeholders, and that's why there are certain tools also that help with that. How does the service design process work, actually? What are the main steps? So first of all, everything starts with discovery. So we start with discovering customer needs and innovation opportunity. Here, usually research is very strong because that is the most important to really deeply understand what is going on and how the customers feel about the offering of a certain company. Then there is a definition phase when we need to look at the future and well, define the customer experience vision, and then also not only have this vision, but also then prioritize and plan what needs to be done, what we as organization can do, for example. Afterwards, there is a very important phase that we always emphasize is creation and testing of concepts and prototypes. So for example, after the definition phase, you would have service concepts, or maybe you would have vision statement, or maybe you would have the value proposition that is also possible to test with the customers to get early feedback, to just understand in principle if it makes sense what your ideas are about and what you're intending to do. After you're quite clear about that, then there is actual more detailed, much more high-level design of the service, which again goes through different levels of service prototypes, or could go in different levels, to be able also to test and actually already try out how certain service would feel to its users. And finally, there is the delivery phase, which means implementation, but also thinking about measurement, so how you would measure the success of this implementation, and also prepare for the next steps. Because, well, service design, if the service, for example, something very new to organization gets implemented, usually it doesn't happen everything at once, so there are phases, and it is important when you have the vision to put steps on the roadmap, and after you implement and deliver the first step, it's always important to think, okay, how do you prepare for the next steps on the roadmap so that you can go back to the create and test phase and continue with your next steps in the implementation. And well, the service design process, I just imagine that it sounds like very, on one hand, very simple because it's just 5 steps, but also on the other hand, when hearing all these things, it's just, well, how is that to engage in such a huge initiative? Because I have heard from clients, from people, that sometimes it's just like the idea of committing to such a huge project, to such a big change project, which is very often associated with service design. It's a really big responsibility, and it sometimes just feels overwhelming, this idea of getting into service design initiatives. However, I really believe that there are just simple things that any company and anyone can start with. And the very beginning is that actually just understand your customers and start with the analysis of the customer journey and defining who your customers are. So yeah, the method of personas or customer archetypes is widely used to actually visualize the customer typology. And then when you understand who your customers are, to think about their journeys and then do the customer journey analysis and carefully map the whole process and what the customer experiences with your company and with other maybe companies that work so closely with your company that for the end user it feels like one process, but for you it's really important to understand where your user is coming from and what kind of pain points does he or she experience when he or she has experience with your particular offering, and what are the pain points, what are the moments of delight. So, and this very simple first step of analyzing the customer journey and mapping this all very clearly, and ideally also mapping the underlying processes. So, for example, like what we call service blueprints, the current state blueprints, how the services are being delivered or how the offering is being delivered. So this could be just the first steps. But you know, just having this very big clarity about the current state customer journey, or that shows your customer's view, or current state service blueprint that shows how you actually deliver your offering, This helps tremendously. Just think about it as like having a map of the territory. Like if you're somewhere in space and time and you don't have a map, you probably will not be really good in moving in any direction, or it will take you just longer to get to the point where you want. But once you are completing this first step of making the map of your current territory, you are ready to move forward. And the next step would be actually thinking about the future. So you kind of repeat the exercise, but you start with the experience vision. So based on all the information that you collected in the first point, then you can really envision how you would like the ideal experience of your customer to look like. And then you think about it and you create future state customer journey. You think like step by step exactly what customer will experience, how we will address certain pain points, which pain points can we as a company address, and which need to be addressed by some other external parties. So you map basically the customer journey for the future. And afterwards, you also do the future state service blueprint. So you also map how exactly it is possible to deliver this journey, to make the customer experience this journey that you just envisioned. In this case, so when we think about the future, of course, you have to think a lot about also the feasibility. When you make a blueprint, you think like how the company can actually do what is envisioned. In this case, you need to, of course, evaluate feasibility, and then in later stages also think about the business models. However, it all comes already afterwards, and from this moment on, I think there could be a lot of different developments of the scenario, depends what you identify in this moment. However, these first two steps are very simple and very straightforward. And also another thing that can be done is to do service prototyping and then iterative refinement, because service design is a lot about doing and getting things like really hands-on. So even if there are ideas that appeared in these two initiatives that I just described, it's really important to prototype it if the idea is already there, and also test it with the users to get early feedback. So these are just very simple 3 things, and especially just starting with the journey analysis and then evolving from there. It's something that can be done without huge commitments or huge investments, and from there companies can grow and build up their knowledge, their mindset, their skills, and grow in their service design initiatives. So now I did like an introduction to the method and how we see it and how we believe in it. And as the next part of the presentation, I would like to share with you some experience that we had with BMW as a large corporation. Because we had the project that we started in 2017, and we have been working with BMW team quite closely. And that was really interesting how working together and how the service design initiatives really evolved in the company. So I would like to share with you some experiences that we had there. So why BMW believes in service design? Because service design is about people. And firstly, you need to deliver the right mindset. That's where everything has started in our project. And that's why the reason the company strongly relies on service design, because we as service designers, as innovators, of course, could have ambition of implementing the best services and could envision the best concepts. However, there are people in the company, in the corporation, who will be driving the services, who will be driving the implementation, and they will be the ones delivering the service. So if we don't start with the mindset, if we don't start working with them and really building up this approach together, then later on it will be just a little bit more difficult to do the successful implementation. So that's why also that's what BMW felt, and that originally service design starts with people, and it started also with building the mindset inside the team. And why is that? Well, because the mindset makes the service future-proof. That's the dimension that I mentioned at the very beginning, and I feel very strongly about it, because if you have the mindset, if you are used to work with the methodology, then you're ready for ever-changing future and growing needs and opening up opportunities. What we did with BMW. So our project was about creating customer-centric services for journey management. So if you're driving a car, there are digital services around it and everything that is around the navigation and traveling. So that the BMW calls the journey management. We have been closely working with the team to design this service portfolio in a customer-centric way. And in this slide, I just put the picture of the office building because, well, when everything started some years ago, the point is that the companies, especially such a brilliant technology, engineering, and R&D driven companies as BMW, have lots of talented people working in them. They do have a lot of excellent ideas that actually live in this organization. And sometimes these ideas, they live in the structures that companies have. And I know many large corporations suffer from this silo, suffer that ideas are, yeah, they just represent the structure sometimes. And even the most brilliant ideas, sometimes they kind of, or maybe they don't fit exactly together, or it's hard to prioritize them. So like it started with these brilliant ideas living inside the silos. But the team felt that they actually have to think about that guy who is a BMW customer, and he will be the one using the services, and he will be the one, yeah, who will either like it or no. And this guy is the one to whom the company and the brand of BMW, they promise to deliver a sheer driving pleasure. That's their main aim, that's their main goal. And the point is that now and also in the future, the sheer driving pleasure, it is not defined only by perfect interior or flawless shapes or this premium, high quality, tangible feel of BMW cars as they have always been. Of course, it's still a big part. However, there is growing importance of this intangible element of the sheer driving pleasure, which are the services. So that's how this logic started. And everything began around the mid-2016, and back then HYVE was not involved yet. At the very beginning, there was a team inside BMW. There were around 3 people, and there was also like the initiative that they need to have journey management services. They need to have not just some services, but the complete portfolio. And the point is that, of course, the R&D teams and technology teams, they had multiple ideas. However, they more felt like how they described it as piles of features of ideas, even if the ideas were really great. However, the problem was that these ideas, they were lacking some of them customer feedback, and it was rather, yeah, difficult to know what actually has to be done first and what is the most valuable. So closer to the mid-2017, this initiatives inside the company has been growing and the team was growing. And in mid-2017, it was already 15 people. And well, as you can imagine, so you have new people joining, more people, more ideas, which is great. However, at some point, it gets a little bit difficult also to understand, well, where should we focus? And in this moment, in around mid-2017, so BMW team came to HYVE to start working together and actually try out how that would be possible to bring in this customer centricity, because the leads of the initiative, they felt that, well, we need really a vision for the service portfolio, and this vision must be customer centric. So to bring everyone on the same page and have a starting point, we had a workshop with them in I think July or August 2017. It was 5 teams of 5 people each for 3 days, working together, working on the service concepts and thinking, okay, what they can do to kind of, yeah, bringing their ideas together and thinking what the vision could be. So the workshop very successful. There were certain real concepts and the ideas for the vision that came. But the next challenge was actually to get the customer feedback, because if there's like no feedback, then how teams can agree between each other actually who is right and who is wrong. So we did a quick round of the research after that workshop. We did online community to test, to get a quick feedback on the concepts and value propositions that the teams developed. We did this community, I think in US, Germany, and China, and we collected the feedback. And the value of online research was that at that moment, it gave us the possibility to just give the teams the feeling of how it is to actually come up with the concept and then immediately get qualitative feedback from all around the world and really know what people like, what dislike. So in that moment, it was really valuable that the teams who were coming from all the multiple backgrounds and different beliefs and visions for what the journey management services should be, they experienced this creative workshop and getting customer feedback. And that was a big success. So our learnings from this moment, from the very early phase of service design, first of all, include everyone and let the people speak out and listen carefully. So that was our big learning from that workshop that we had. Honestly, conversations was not really always very easy. Of course, there were some discussions between the people. However, they were all healthy discussions, and it was really valuable at the end to have this alignment between the people who are the ones to build the services later. The second learning is focus on the customer experience, because in these moments of disagreement, it will be the first point of common agreement, because it's not something that between you and me, who's right, who's wrong. We can always say that customer is this third person who is the most important, and the customer matters, and then there is agreement in a team. And finally, it is really important to share good experience of this first project internally to foster customer-centric mindset, because there was this group of 15 people who had a very good experience, and then they experienced this methodology and they had this first feedback from the users, and then it was really important to share it inside, and that also raised awareness and got more people curious in the methodology and make the team also more confident in doing what they were doing. So after that, there was another breaking point, because, well, now great, we have very customer-centric vision, we have concepts, it's time to deliver and define the services and actually start delivering them. And in this case, the team, well, here it says 20 people, but then there were more stakeholders involved, in fact, and the structure was getting more complicated. And in this case, it's really important to find an approach how you can move on from ideas, concepts to real implementation, and also not just like in the startup surroundings, but in a situation of a corporation with its rules and its structures. So our learnings from that, so service definition and the first delivery. It was very important learning that we customized project management approach and service design tools to be the most valuable and effective in realities of specific organization. In that case, that was BMW, because as the agency, as the invited experts, we really wanted to make sure that teams, they can be successful in their realities. So we had a project management approach that helped to involve everyone in the certain level of cadence and the way how they could be involved in the project, provide their input, and we were working together at the same time without overwhelming them with too much work, but at the same time having enough input to keep things going. And that was very helpful. And by providing and customizing these tools, we really were able to develop a closer relationship and closer and better mode of work with the teams. The second point, and this was actually the crucial and still is because the project is still ongoing, is to prepare for frequent user research, because research should keep up with the pace of development. That was a really crucial point, because if you think about large organizations, and even if you have research teams, so, well, maybe in some organizations, this market and analysts or research team, they could be faster. However, sometimes it just naturally takes longer time for them to collect the questions, to get the feedback from the users and give back results. If you're doing the development of services and you want to really bring things to the market very fast, and in this case it's digital services, so it can be quite agile, and this was the agile development in the teams, you cannot wait 6 months to get the feedback. So we got prepared for very frequent and regular user research, meaning having it every month, every couple of months, as much as we needed. How we did it? So we had the research-based approach supported by several methods. So on one hand, we included expert interviews and user interviews, so at-home user interviews. From experts, we were able to get this inspiration to envision, have future scenarios, to get this kind of more futuristic mood. And from the users, we were able to understand the context and get in-depth insights. Then we applied an ethnography insight. So it's a social media research tool that helps to reveal unspoken user needs, pain points, and wishes, because we were analyzing the social media conversations, so what users write online in openly accessible forums, so you can read and understand and analyze things that people maybe would not be able to express in words when you ask them directly during the interview. So we looked there as well. And finally, our biggest asset of the project actually is the long-term customer advisory board. So it's an online community with car owners, premium car owners that we created. We built up this community in one in Germany, one in US, and one in China. And so we have around 70 participants in each country, and we involve them every couple of months to give us quick feedback on our specific questions. So for example, when we deliver a concept, we do wireframes, we do some maybe clickable prototypes, something very basic things that we can just share with them digitally, get their feedback and get their evaluations, and then react very fast. So the turnaround time is much, much faster. So combination of these three main methods gave us a lot of depth to really be confident in doing the right things, but then also enough flexibility and speed to then also proceed and develop the services also fast and bring them to the market. And the final learning from this phase is that after all the research is done, so how do you go on and how you can actually keep this picture of all the features and services that you develop. So experience mapping supported the team alignment by linking the customer and technological perspectives. So experience maps, so that was just one example. So we created them based on the data, based on the research data, and we designed them as stories. So I strongly believe that experience maps, they have to be data-based, because this is something that teams will look into when they develop even the smallest features or the services, but it's something that they can refer to, they can get inspiration, but this inspiration will be truly based on real customer insights. There is no assumption, so everything really genuinely comes from the users. That's why also any ideas that the teams would have, they would be actually based on the real needs. So that was crucial for us. And that's why we built them based on the research, but we designed them as stories so that people can easily remember them. And then they would, oh yeah, remember the Konstantin, the guy that was driving there and there. And then they could just relate to that and have the associations. So in the final phase, the challenges of scaling. So after there was the successful process of definition and delivery of the services, and it was working quite well for the journey management team, and we're still doing it. We're keep delivering different features and further innovating the services, thinking about the future. There is actually also the need to scale, and these are the next challenges, let's say, that we will be thinking about and also experiencing with the team. Because in a large corporation, of course, you imagine that there is much more also teams and parties involved in delivering the complete customer experience that goes also beyond journey management. So, and for internally for BMW, it's also valuable when more people can work with the methodology and just have the same view. So these are the challenges of scaling that happen. So far our learning, so that service definition sprints, they actually help to facilitate this quick development, testing and refinement of specific features. And on the other hand, the refined toolbox, so these tools that I mentioned that we were creating custom for BMW, and we refine them all over the process, and we are creating this toolbox, and we're collecting the success stories so that it is possible to also scale the same success that we experienced in this context also with the other teams when the teams are growing, or also maybe teams from different areas who want to apply the same approach. So looking just back on the project and all the phases, that's where we started. We started with doing right things, because at the beginning we were delivering the mindset and vision. So before actually thinking about delivering the services, it's really important to get this customer perspective, have a clear vision, and then go into definition and delivery of services. So then towards the second part, it's important to do the things right after doing the right things. And in this case, the tools help a lot to really deliver and scale. And finally, just to answer the final question of the webinar, so how does the service design help companies to be more customer-centric? Well, in fact, service design is a mindset, and it's also a toolbox. And the mindset is something that helps you to see a big picture and understand the whole experience from the customer perspective. And at the same time, the toolbox, it's something very practical, hands-on, that helps you to excel in these details that you are contributing to in this big picture, and then you can develop and deliver valuable solutions. So thank you very much. I think that was it from my side, from the presentation. I would be also happy to answer your questions right away. We will have a look what we have. And in case you have any other questions, of course, we're always open for you, and this presentation will be shared, so you can always get in touch if you have any questions or want to know more about the methodology.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna. Really, really cool that you shared so much experience, and also that you shared your learnings from the real life project with us, with the audience. That's really a great value, and like Anna said, we will share the presentation afterwards. Also, the webinar will be recorded, and there will be a possibility for you to review it. So what we will now do, maybe for some more minutes, that we switch again back to the video mode, and we will have a look if there are some questions from the audience. So now we are back in video mode, and we will check the chat window if there are any questions. I can see now one question popping up. I have to go a little bit more closely to the screen to read it.
Thanks a lot. What is the difference between service design and design thinking? Because they're both very customer-centric. This is definitely true, and actually this is the question that I really like that that you asked, because in fact this question is also discussed a lot in the service design community. And in fact, I believe that service design, it builds on a lot on the principles of design thinking, because of course design thinking is customer-centric, and it builds on the real needs of the users, and it has this iterative approach, and service design strongly builds on. However, service design also has this other side that goes from, for example, other disciplines like systems thinking, that helps you to get this holistic perspective on the service. And then it has also certain implementation and prototyping tools that are specifically applied to designing these intangible elements, designing the services. So this is the main, let's say, I don't see them as very different. I see them a lot as complementary, and they're both very valuable approaches that we use in our practice. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Anna. Maybe some more questions from the crowd, from the audience. So just give it a try, type it in the chat window. I can see there's another question popping up here. Can you recommend any book or website to learn more about service design method?
Yes, definitely. So one of my favorite books, well, there are two. There's the first one, it's the Service Design Thinking. And the second one that came afterwards, it's called the Service Design Doing. It's from the team of authors, and also I have a link. So when I was talking about service design principles, you can see also the reference to this book in the slides that we will share later on. I really like it because the first book is really focused on this mindset and what service design is. It's more like generic, and it's really great introduction to the method. And Service Design Doing is very practical, so it gives really a lot of information about every single method or template. So how to work with the personas, how to build the journeys, what is important, how to build blueprints, and it answers a lot of questions and gives a lot of examples. Regarding the specific websites, So I know there is like, I don't remember how it is exactly now, but it's either service design tools or something like that. There's a website called like this that just has a lot of different templates as well, that sometimes could be inspiring when you look for different frameworks, how to structure your thinking. Or I also really like reading on Medium because it's a great source of getting inspiration from top minds in the industry. So either from service design practitioners who work for companies or who work also for, let's say companies for the client side or maybe for agencies as well. So there are lots of thought leaders who share their experiences. So I just search for information on Medium and get inspiration from there.
There's another question. I will read it for the audience. Do you think testing ideas that are already floating around unvalidated in the own company is already feasible on paper, or does it make more sense to have it a tangible mock-up of your service to give users, customers in your survey more interaction or look and feel of your idea?
I mean, actually, I'm always a big fan of giving look and feel, and it does not have to be like really building it like something huge and physical, but even like sometimes the visualization helps a lot. So it could start with like visualization of the concept. So for services, it could be like a storyboard, because, you know, think of it as a movie, you show like how the process develops. Or for example, you could also complement these storyboards with some wireframes that show exactly how certain interfaces would look like in this case. Or you can use a lot of like this kind of very simple ways of communicating ideas. And I guess it's not only would be tremendously valuable for testing to get the feedback, but also it would be also very helpful for the company, because as you said, for example, when ideas are floating around unvalidated. So from what I saw in the clients, sometimes like even in the company, people are not sure exactly what the idea means, or like when it's not visualized in a certain way or it's not described. And having this moment of actually visualizing it and making it just a little bit more tangible, it helps also internally, firstly, to discuss what we actually mean by this idea. And then when we're clear about that, then go and test it with users, because then you can also collect more valid and valuable feedback. When you can have your idea clearly explained, then you get the feedback on what you wanted to hear. Because if you just describe an idea, for example, verbally or not comprehensive enough, then it could be that maybe just the person or the user with whom you want to test it understood it wrong, because it's just incredible how differently people perceive information. Then you also will not get the feedback that is valuable for your next steps in development. So yes, I'm a big fan of giving some, something more tangible to the idea, at least some visualization.
Some more questions plopping in, so we will try to answer them. There's one very interesting one. In essence, the method depends a great deal on feedback and iteration. You do not know what you get at the start. How does it work with old school managers who want a detailed picture of a product before starting to implement?
So, that in that sense, the old school managers who want a detailed picture of the product before starting to implement. I mean, actually, I agree in the sense that you need to have a clear view of what you're going to do before you go into implementation. That's why I think this rounds of prototyping, testing, and iteration makes sense, because when you go into implementation, you must be quite clear about what you're doing and you must be confident, because if you're already at implementation, it means you're going even for higher investment. So in that sense, yes. On the other hand, of course, in the service design, let's say at the beginning, it would be not clear exactly what you would come up with towards the end of the process. However, if we're thinking about innovation process, for example, in service design that is interlinked in this, and if you use service design approach, it might be that you will realize that, well, you need certain processes, you need certain digital touch points, you maybe need a physical touch point if it's a really broad, very open question at the very beginning of the process. So I think that it is important to involve the old school managers at the beginning of this process and also discuss with them their ambition, how innovative they want to go, how far they want to go, to discuss with them target groups, for whom you actually want to develop this this innovation that could be service, for example, at the end, and also to be clear with them about the vision, because the old school managers, if they on senior positions, I assume they're the ones who carry the vision of the company, and it is important, of course, to build on the vision and ambition and be specific to target groups and start from there, and at least to give the confidence in the beginning in the opportunity areas, in the where it could go, and then involve the stakeholder along the process to show how it all builds up to actually reach the moment when you already have quite clear and defined product or service towards the end of this process, when you already went through all the rounds of research, testing, refinement, and you have this clear thing in your hands. Then the stakeholder, your old school manager, has been involved at the very beginning. He knew or she knew where it all started, and it is more likely that this person would also understand and see the value in that, and would be more prepared to make a decision about the implementation.
Maybe we take one last question. In which form would you deliver the final output of a service design project?
It depends on the phase. So like if it's like, for example, the very first steps, as I said, like you actually could start service design project, and the very first thing, the customer journey analysis. So it could be, for example, if we do research and we deliver the customer insights, so and then we can do the customer typology, so personas, customer archetypes, then the customer journey for each persona. So and in the customer journey you would have pain points and different emotional loads of different moments, and then possibilities for improvement, and all the different aspects that are represented in the customer journey. So this very detailed map of the current situation. It already could be the delivery product itself for the service design project. And then afterwards, so for example, we can then continue, and we can have, for example, experience vision workshop, and then after workshop we can have visualizations for this experience, we can have storyboards, then we can have future state customer journey, future state blueprint. So these are all the artifacts, the very practical and tangible results of the work that you can receive at these stages. However, later on, of course, depends what you want to do. So if you decide to do, for example, a digital service, then of course later the UX team will also join, and they will be developing for very specific touch points the UX design, and they can do wireframes or clickable prototypes, or go even forward until the implementation. Or if it's a processes, so the service that involves like the processes, so for example, it could be the prototype, even in the sense of staging the whole service to try it out, and then it could be also customer feedback on that. And finally, for example, it's also the service that involves the processes, that could be even level of detail of the delivery, could be even the scripts that certain people need to say on certain positions, for example, if it's really customer facing roles that they have, and recommendations and the guidelines of how service has to be implemented on very specific details. So I guess there are let's say different level of the detail, and the closer it goes to the end, the more diversity it is there.
Thank you very much, Anna. This was the last question. So if you have maybe another question popping up, then just write us an email. You have the contact details from Anna and also from myself in the presentation that we will share afterwards. It's now time to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Anna, for your time.
Everyone to join and ask questions. I really enjoyed that you were also sharing some questions. It's always really interesting. Please also feel free to get in touch, because I really love talking about this topic and happy to share any information or suggestions. So I'm really grateful that you joined and listened to us today.
One last information from my side. This was the first webinar about service design, but it's more like a start of a series of webinars. So we will more interesting and exciting topics coming up. Of course, we will inform you via email, and so stay tuned and stay connected with HYVE, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.